Le Cotte Farm dates back to 1694, when the first of 11 Huguenot farms was granted to the French immigrants who fled their native country during the 17th century. Today, the farm enjoys a modern, luxurious escape to holidaymakers, but it's, of course, the multiple garden rooms that caught our attention. The creative responsible for the most recent updates to the buildings and gardens is Cape Town-based designer Dominic Touwen.
I was approached by the clients to find a farm for them in Cape Town. They have another hotel in Zambia, and they were very keen to get something in Franschhoek. So I found the property in the first place, and I remember driving up the sort of Oak Avenue and just thinking, this is it. It's a really, really unique place and really, really incredibly well positioned in Franschhoek. So we were very privileged to be asked to do the architecture, the interiors and the landscaping on this project, which means you can really integrate those three disciplines into one harmonious whole. We started with the old buildings. There's a wonderful old homestead there. It's Cape Dutch homestead, dates back to 1750 in some of its oldest parts. And the hotel really wanted to maintain that atmosphere of agriculture and of a working farm. So we were asked to design a garden that was going to work around the hotel. And that's kind of quite an important part of the design. It means that you don't end up with a garden that looks fantastic for 1 month, really spectacular, because then you would have too many gaps for the rest of the year. So it's a sort of a case of combining plants and structure, and so that it can always have something to show your guests. So we were very lucky to start with some incredible structure in the garden. By that I mean the buildings, the trees, the stone walls, the landscaping, the hedging, etc. And at Le Cotte we had an amazing collection of old oak trees and wonderful old buildings. So that's a really good starting point. And that sort of sets up the structure of the garden. And then we fill in from there. I really like to kind of create atmospheres and moods and to tell stories in different parts of the garden. So at Le Cotte you'll see there's a werf, which is kind of in the middle of the buildings, and that we wanted to keep very quiet, sort of green lawns, oak trees, the way it would have been traditionally, and not a lot of color, not a lot of decorative planting there. But then there are some special courtyards that have got really, really quite a lot more punchy colors in them. For instance, there's a courtyard of the conservatory, where we chose to do coral pink bougainvilleas on the walls and coral pink striped cushions. So the architecture, the interiors, the gardens all talk together in a very harmonious sort of scheme, and people love it. It's very, very photographic. It's very editorial, and it works really well on that front. So another area that we created was around the pool. And I'd been in Capri and in Italy quite a lot just before that, and I really wanted to bring that feeling back here, but in a Cape way. So we used a lot of blue and white stripes and striped umbrellas, and then we planted a very quiet kind of white and blue garden around that. And so we've got Trachelospermum on the walls, which creates a really sort of a green room, and then the pool is in the middle of that, and I think it turned out pretty well. People love it. The real pièce de résistance of the gardens is the long walk, which is a double border in a very traditional English design, but planted in a kind of Cape Mediterranean planting scheme. So here we've sort of combined a lot of salvias and cistus and plants that have got good color through the rest of summer and have that Mediterranean dry summer feeling, but planted in a very traditional way. There's a lawn down the middle and then a double border backed with hedging. And that garden's actually got 3 portions. The first is flower gardens, which are quite bright and colorful. Then there's a sort of restful space in the middle, which is all greens and quite kind of clipped hedges. And then there's a working vegetable garden in the last portion of it. So the vegetable gardens are designed to be used by the restaurant, have fresh produce. It was a very important part of the brief. And there's also, at the end of that, a decorative chicken house, a fowl run, a dovecot, lots of different words for it. So the hen house is based on a traditional design, and that the chickens live downstairs and they have their little laying boxes, and then upstairs is designed for doves or pigeons. And they had little courtyards on the sides which were used for cockfighting. We don't use them for that though. We've got black Orpingtons and we've got Cookooks, and they really are just beautiful. Everyone loves them. They're friendly and they lay wonderful fresh eggs, which the restaurant gets to use every day. So we created a wildflower meadow near the parking area. It was a bit of a wild area and it had been covered by aliens, and so we just decided it was a great place to create a meadow. I love meadows because they have a great combination of plants and they're particularly good for wildlife, for insects, birds, etc. They're a little tricky in the Cape. The Cape obviously has a Mediterranean climate as opposed to, upcountry, which gets a bit of summer rain. So we have got some irrigation, which just extends the rain, the rainy season by another month or so. So the important thing to remember with meadows, especially here in the Cape, is that they need to be mowed at least twice a year. In the first few years, the more you mow it, the better it's going to be, because you're cutting down all the weeds which don't like to be mowed, but the grasses and the flowering plants don't mind the mowing. Then you can let the flowers flower, and then after they've set seed, you cut them down, late summer. What I love about garden design is that it really is a long-term thing. Some of the plants you're planting now are really only going to reach fulfill their full shape and size in 20, 30, 50 years' time. And I think we really do need to garden for that length of time. And the great gardens of the world were often conceptualized more than 100 years ago, 200 years ago. And so you're seeing trees that have grown into their full size, etc. So at Le Cotte we had to do some planting for now, so that the gardens look great really in the short term. But we also had to do planting for the long term. I'm really looking forward to seeing how the gardens evolve and how some of the vision that I had now plays out over the years. Obviously we may have to adjust some things going forward, but I'm really looking forward to that process.
With a striking balance between the old and new, the wise old oaks and the Mediterranean-inspired planting, there's so much inspiration to take home with you and implement in your very own garden.